Sunday afternoon. My name is Kelly Branigan. As Mary said, I'm a registered nurse. I had specialized in critical care and education. I also am a real estate broker. I'm a mom. I have 2 sons. I'm a native upstater. I grew up in the North Country on a small farm. I love New York State. I've never wanted to live anywhere else. I've lived out near Rochester and out near Albany, and I settled in the town of Middlefield because it reminded me very much of where I grew up. Very rural, quiet, look at the stars at night, the place I wanted to raise my kids. I wanted them to grow up like I grew up. You know, and I love where I live. You know, you think about why you live where you do, what's important to you. I didn't want to stay in Albany. We were there for a couple of years when my husband finished schools because I didn't want to live in the city. I didn't like the noise, I didn't like the pollution. You know, I wanted to be out in the country again. So how did I get involved in all this? I'm nobody famous. You know, I'm just like you guys. And I don't like to be out other than, you know, my nursing education talks. I'm not a person who likes to get up and speak in front of people. The first time I spoke in front of our town board, I had a piece of paper, my hands were shaking, my voice was shaking, but it was important to do. My husband had actually taken a locums job down in Pennsylvania, right about the time they started doing seismic testing in Middlefield. And we had seen that movie Gasland, and we looked at it and said, wow, those poor people, that must be really awful. So the job he had happened to be in Bradford County, in the town in Tehanic and Towanda. And he came home and he said, remember that movie Gasland? And I said, yeah. He said, well, I'm living in Gasland right now. And he would come home and tell me what it was like to live with gas drilling on a weekly basis, 24 hours a day. He'd come home on the weekends, he'd get out of the car, and he'd stand for a minute and just breathe the air. And he'd say, I can't tell you how sweet the air is here at home compared to down there in Pennsylvania. And he talked about the endless streams of trucks and the out-of-state workers and the crime and what they were seeing in the hospitals with the health impacts, increases in STDs, the impacts on the hospitals and the community, the cost to the taxpayers there. So when they started doing seismic testing in Middlefield, you know, unbeknownst to us, because they don't have to tell anybody, it was an out-of-state crew on a very residential road, they just popped in one day and decided to set off dynamite charges. Well, the neighbors in that area said, you know, what's going on? They corralled these crews to find out, and they were doing seismic testing for Gaston to do a test well. Well, our question was, we have zoning in Middlefield. You have never come to our town board to ask us if you can do this, to tell us what you're doing, and we need to know more about this. And we didn't know a lot about gas drilling. So we went to our town board basically to get a cease and desist order for the seismic crew and for Gaston until we could get a handle on what was happening. We held educational forums. You know, we wanted to learn what this was all about. So we asked the experts. You know, how many times do you hear towns don't have the knowledge to make decisions on gas drilling? Well, we're not trying to decide how to do gas drilling, but we do have the knowledge to know what we want our towns to be like. Our master plan has been around since the 70s, and it says that Middlefield will protect its rural character. We don't have heavy industrial areas. Our big industry is brewery Omegang. We have farms, we have forests, and that is what we protect. We want our children to have that heritage. So heavy industrial gas drilling with its associated accoutrements does not fit. So we basically told the industry, you know, we have regulations and you are not allowed. And they came and told us, you can't do this, you can't stop us. Just like in PA, when the industry down there put out their little statement about the shale army is coming, resistance is futile. And that's their attitude. They're an army and we are encumbrances. We're here to be invaded. You know, they're not here to be our friends. They're not here to make our communities better. They're here to get the gas and get out. You know, so it became very clear to us, especially with how they treated our townspeople that had concerns. They were rude, condescending. They brought their lawyers in, they threatened us, and they said, you try to do this, try to stop us, we will sue you. Well, we're a little town. We only have around 2,000 people. And we told our town board, if you back us up, you stand up for us, and don't worry about being sued. So they did. They not only enforced the ban that we had, but they wrote our first town law that made it crystal clear that gas drilling and everything else, solution mining, the wastes, were not allowed in Middlefield. So they corralled a corporate farmer, and she, in conjunction with the industry, did sue us. Our ban has been upheld twice now. It's going to the Court of Appeals, the highest court, and we're very hopeful that we will be upheld. Now, you hear a lot from the industry about the dangers of home rule. This can't happen because home rule is dangerous. Well, the interesting thing is, home rule is written into our Constitution in New York State. This isn't some big radical idea. The state knew that towns were best equipped to determine what they wanted for their communities. Not somebody down in New York City or somebody in Albany, but our local boards, our local communities. We know what we want. And that's why home rule's there, and that's why we have the option for master plans and for zoning, so that we can let everybody else know what's important to us. So home rule isn't some wild-eyed radical idea. In any town, we see a lot of moratoriums and bans, and it's not because we're fear-mongering, wacky activists. We're regular people, and we know what's important to us. And why would we believe the gas industry, have them come in to threaten us and take over our towns? It's funny, even in the S-guys, the DEC, as bad as the S-guy said impacts on community character, defined as the economic, demographic, and social characteristics of the affected communities are expected to be significant. And we know that. We see that in Pennsylvania. We see what's happening down there. They talk about, all these little industry catchphrases. You hear how great PA's doing and all the money that's rolling in and the streets are paved with gold. Well, when you really look at it and look what's happening, look at the jobs. PA right now I think is, like 49th. Their job creation is no better than it is here without gas drilling. In many of those counties, they actually have less job creation. These tens of thousands of jobs didn't happen. I think they predicted something like 40,000 jobs in PA, and then they went to Ohio and predicted 100,000 jobs. Outlandish. So I guess they took all the jobs they didn't create in PA and they're going to create them in Ohio. The jobs, as Chip said, go with the rigs. They bring their own crews in, they bring their seismic crews in, they use excuses like, we don't have a prepared workforce here, or your people can't pass the drug tests, which is pretty laughable looking at the skyrocketing rates of drug abuse when the gas rigs roll into town. So the job argument is a false one. They aren't going to create jobs here any more than they've created jobs elsewhere. You look at North Dakota with the Bakken Shale, and they have a huge influx of workers from Texas, Oklahoma. These guys have to move into the community to do the work. When the gas is gone, when the oil is gone, the jobs are gone. These are not long-term jobs for us, even the few jobs we get. Now, some people will make money. Some people in PA got great leases. Got a lot of money off of it. Some people have expanded their businesses. They have increased the hotels and the restaurants. But what they're also finding now, especially in areas in Bradford County, as the gas drillers pull out, they're stuck with all these hotels. They're stuck with these businesses. They don't have jobs for the workers that they had hired. Everything in economics, when you read about bust boom cycles, tells you exactly what's going to happen. This isn't new, it's not a surprise, and New York will be no different. It'll be different here. We've got regulations, we've got the DEC. Well, the DEC can't handle what we already have. We have tens of thousands of abandoned wells that have never been plugged. And all those wells are conduits for contamination if they start doing horizontal hydrofracking. There's already been water contamination in western New York from vertical wells. Dr. Ron Bishop has done extensive studies on this. The DEC, they don't have the money to plug these things. The regulations are ludicrous. 100 feet from a person's house for a drill rig, that's what was in the S-guys. 150 feet from a school. That's not okay with me. You know, if you have a neighbor that leases, if they have a lot of land, they can arrange, maybe with the drill company, if they don't want it next to their house, they can push it over onto the property boundary and put it next to yours. We hear a lot about property rights. You can't take away my property rights, my rights to harvest my minerals. Well, there's a thing in real estate called a bundle of rights, which ensures that you enjoy, that you have the quiet enjoyment, peaceful enjoyment of your property. That's not going to happen with a drilling operation next door. The other thing that they don't talk about when they talk about rights is compulsory integration. You know, they should be up in arms, anybody who's pro-gas. This was an industry-written law, snuck in the dead of night, no debate. It basically says if the industry controls 60% of the spacing unit, even if you don't want drilling on your property, they can forcibly integrate you into that drilling unit. Doesn't matter if you don't want it. Too bad. Your rights are taken away for the industry so that they can get that 640 or whatever it is that they're going to be doing spacing unit. So where are the property rights? What about my property rights? You know, what if I wanted to lease my land, but I'm seeing that the lease, prices are low, I want to wait till gas is in demand, and then maybe I'll lease my land. Well, if I get compulsory integrated, I don't have a choice. You know, and I'm stuck with all the effects of it. You know, you'll get a 12.5%, you know, for a royalty, if there's a royalty. You know, so you can't have it both ways. You can't talk about property rights and rights to harvest your minerals and take away everybody else's rights. You know, take away people's rights for the quiet enjoyment of their properties for the reasons that they moved to a rural area. You know, so that's just, that argument always killed me. And, you know, there's several others. When you look at what the industry says, you know, we talked about, PA. Now, PA doesn't have a severance tax, neither does New York. They instituted a drilling impact fee, which is not helping. In PA, they're cutting funding to schools. They're cutting funding to social service programs. You know, there is some money for roads, but the vast majority of the roads have been ruined. The money comes from the taxpayers. Ad valorem taxes, which you hear about in New York, will have ad valorem taxes. They only kick in if you have a productive well, and the way they're structured, a lot of times they don't kick in until a few years down the road. When that well is on its decline, they've already taken the big glut of gas, so the money you're going to be making is on much less gas, and these wells last for maybe 8 years, and they're gone. There's a perpetual drilling treadmill to keep the production up. You hear about the little Christmas tree. You won't know we're here. We'll put a little Christmas tree out in the field, and that's all you'll see. Well, they kind of forget, again, that to get that gas to market, you need gathering lines, you need production lines, you need staging areas, you need compressor stations. There is massive industrialization with this industry. It's not just a little Christmas tree in the back 40. They don't like to talk about all these things, and if you really go to PA, go to Texas, look at these areas, do aerial views of what it looks like. They're predicting, I think, in Bradford County, something like 9,000 wells in addition to what they already have. They cut down the trees, they bulldoze the topsoil. How is the farmer going to farm those fields again? As for reclamation, you know, a lot of the wells are shut in. As they drill longer horizontals, they need bigger pads. So the impact to our forests and to our farmland is huge. And this isn't going to go away. Once it's there, it's there. We talk about saving the farms. You know, that's the big thing. We have to save the farmers. They need this money to save the farms. Well, I grew up on a small farm, and we couldn't afford the prices of feed. And this was back in the early 70s. Farmers do have problems. Farmers have had problems for a long time, and we do need to help the farmers. But this isn't going to help our farmers. It's not helping the farmers in PA. They're showing that in these areas with the highest production, they're actually losing farms and losing cows. You know, if you can't produce and if you don't have water like many of the farmers in PA, how are you going to farm? Some people, if they get the money, they take it and leave farming. You know, this isn't going to save the family farm. When the gas is gone, what's the farmer do then? It's not like this gas production money is going to continue on forever. if there even is any. You know, so that's another industry talking point. So, like patriotism, drill a well, save a soldier. We need energy independence. We need this gas. It's your patriotic duty. I've heard that before too. Well, my husband's a veteran, and he takes exception to this drill well, save a soldier line, because what's happening with this gas? They can't make money here. So now they're pushing for LNG exports. They want to take the gas, ship it overseas to Japan, to China, other areas where they can make money on it. It's not for us. It's not for cheap gas. You know, they're pushing, you know, LNG, you know, compressed vehicles and LNG stations and convert your homes to gas. Increase the demand with very little gas in the ground, and what are we looking at? Huge prices for gas. You know, and gas, if it gets to a certain price, and they're saying how it's cleaner than coal, well, all the studies show if gas gets to a certain point, coal will actually be more economical. So how are we saving and not using coal? You know, so in all these arguments that they use, it's very important to look between the lines of what the industry says. There's never been a case of water contamination from fracking. Well, A, that's not true, because there have been cases where the fracks have gone out of zone and hit aquifers. There was one in Canada, and of course they say, well, nobody used that for drinking water anyway, it doesn't count. Methane migration, we're finding arsenic in wells that they're studying. The problem is the technology has far outpaced the science. They developed the technology, but with no thought to how it impacts you and your community. What happens down the road in the future when those well casings fail? What happens with the aquifers if it does get in the aquifer and it starts to migrate into other aquifers, as it is in some states out in the western parts of the country? There's no way to stop it. So they're doing all this now with no thought to the future. Health impacts. You've heard it, just anecdotes. It's fear-mongering people coming up with anecdotes. Well, there have never been health studies done on the impacts of gas drilling. We're starting to do them. You know, they're looking at PA, they're looking at the impacts down there, people complaining of rashes, of respiratory problems, the cancers, the GI distress, nosebleeds, animal deaths. They're looking at, is it from the air impacts? Is it from the water? Is it from the soil? Is it from the food? We're way behind on studies of health. There are a lot of anecdotes out there. And the problem with the industry, if somebody has a problem, what's the industry do? They start to complain, they start to get some press, they come in, they pay them off, and they gag them, they shut them up. There's a family called Howell, which is in PA, surrounded by the industry, and they were having health impacts. And she was very outspoken, so the industry gave them a settlement, and they took it. Why? Were they sellouts? No, they were mom and dad who were worried about their kids. They took the money so they could get out. The industry gagged the kids too. Well, we didn't intend to do that. Well, when you read the paperwork, they did. The kids are gagged forever. You know, this is the industry that doesn't want the truth out there. They want to keep drilling, they want that gas, and you don't matter. You hear the risks and everything. Who takes those risks on? It's not the industry, it's you. When they come into your community and drill, if they contaminate the water, if their compressor stations cause air pollution, and they're spewing benzene, toluene into the air, who does that risk fall on? They live elsewhere. It falls on your community. The health costs fall on your community. They fall on us as taxpayers, because we will be responsible for the care of ill people. You know, so talking about risks, like there's risk when you drive a car. There's risk if you jump out of an airplane. The difference is you choose the risk that you want to take on. They are choosing the risk for you in the case of gas drilling. They are choosing to put those risks on you, and you don't have a say in it. In the health profession, when you have a medical procedure done, your doctor has to give you a consent form to sign. They say to you, these are the risks of this surgery. These are the good outcomes, and these are the potential negative outcomes. And you have to know everything before you consent to have that done. Nobody's asking for you to give consent in this. They want to come in, they want to take, and leave. And that's why it's so important in your communities to ask questions, to go to your town board meetings. Many places have passed moratoriums because they feel they need more information. Many places have passed bans because they've got enough information, they want nothing to do with this. You know, this transient industry who is not here to make life better for us. They're here to make money. You've got to go to your town boards. And if you have a town board that A, has leases, B, that are frightened, C, that are just oblivious to reality, sometimes you have to replace that board. A town board exists to do your will, not their will. You know, they don't have to be afraid. You know, we're living proof of that in Middlefield. You know, we have paid for this lawsuit. We have raised funds, people have donated to us, because we feel that strongly. Now, how dare you come in here and threaten our town where we live and make our homes, you know, so that you can take the gas and the money and leave, and leave the rest behind for us. They don't think about the local impacts to you guys. What does it mean to you as a community? Above and beyond the increased crime and the increased traffic and the increased health costs and the transient workers, one thing that you have to consider is your own pocketbook. When they started doing seismic testing in Middlefield, we had to scramble to get water testing done. We had groups of 10 at a time. We contracted with an agency that has to be a state-certified agency. It can't just be, you know, John's water testing down the street. It costs anywhere from $700, $800 for a water test. I have a big pond. I had that tested as well, so it cost me $1,400 to test for all the baselines that needed to be tested for. You need to do that prior to any drilling or any seismic testing. You need to know your baseline. Don't depend on the gas company, because as we've seen in PA, they do the testing, they own the results. And they also pick who is going to be tested by. And there was a big to-do down there because some of the testing companies that they were using were in collusion with them and weren't testing for what they were supposed to be testing for. So you need to get your water testing done pre-drilling. Then you will need to get your water testing done after drilling, forever. Because we don't know when those casings will fail. We don't know when those chemicals will start migrating. We don't know, because the science isn't there. The science is there to tell us that the well casings will fail. That's the industry science. You know, the industry says, look at the science, not emotion. Well, we are looking at the science, their science. We look at the Society of Fracturing Engineers, who basically say, you know, we really don't know how far these fracks go, the horizontal, the vertical. They have a whole litany of things that they really don't understand about the fracturing, but they know they make a lot of money at it. You know, so it's funny, the industry says look at the science, but when we do try to look at the science, you know, they don't want to hear about it. We hear about the methane migration, we hear about the contamination. They always found some way to poo-poo that, to try to, you know, take that science, oh, that's those radical leftist environmental wackos, and they just want to stop drilling. You know, but you never hear them coming back about the casings, because the casing failure is something that they don't know how to solve. They know about it, they can't fix it. They're concrete and they're steel. They're all going to fail. Who's around to pick up the pieces? We are. The other thing you'll need to think about is radon testing. You know, get a baseline radon test for your home. We do have radon in the area. And you should do that anyway, just for your own health reasons, because radon is the second leading cause of lung cancer after smoking. So it's a good idea anyway. But if they start drilling, we really don't know what's going to happen with mobilization of radon. You need to document the condition of your home, of your foundation, your water well, your septic, because if those are affected, you need to have that proof. You know, we have seen earthquake from injection wells, and there have been some earthquakes from the drilling process, and the state here really doesn't know where all the fault lines are. So if they do hit a fault and there's an earthquake and your home is damaged, you need to have that documentation ahead of time. Baseline health testing. We're seeing areas in Colorado right now who are trying to do baseline health testing of their communities so that if there are health impacts, they have some proof to say to the industry, hey, we didn't have these drilling compounds in our bloodstreams before, and now they're there. A lot of places are also doing air quality testing for their towns to prove that they had good air quality before the drilling operations with all of their trucks and the diesel, the compressor stations, the leaking pipelines. Once they get into your community, it's too late. So these are costs to you, but they're important costs. If you choose to go forward with drilling, you need to try to protect yourselves. Why do I say try? Because you're up against a $1 billion industry. And you are fighting against a $1 billion industry. So you and I, regular folks, it's the burden of proof is on us to prove that they caused us harm. No, it's all backwards. They don't have to prove that it's safe, that they didn't cause harm. We have to prove that they did. And that's what a lot of folks have been faced with in PA. When they find these impacts, the industry basically says, prove it. We've got more money than you. So what do? If they'll buy you out, you take it and you try to leave, where do you go? Some folks can't sell their homes. They talk about real estate impacts. I put a lot of money into my home, because it's for my kids. I love my home. I have a mortgage. Mortgages say you cannot turn a residential home and property into a commercial zone. Elizabeth Radow and Greg May are two names that you can Google, have done a lot of write-ups on the impacts to real estate, the impacts on your mortgage, on your home insurance. A lot of places now, if you've leased your property, good luck trying to find insurance. They may call your mortgage in because you have taken your property and turned it into a commercial property and you were in violation of your mortgage. Just on the basic lines of property values, you hear people talk about, well, property values have skyrocketed in PA. Well, for people that are in the hot zones that are trying to sell property so they can collect on those leases, sure, they may get a lot of money for their land. If I'm somebody who wants to rent out to the gas drillers, I may pick up some homes so I can charge exorbitant prices for the rentals, kick the people out that are in there, rent them to the industry, make a lot of money. Well, what happens when the industry leaves? Then you have a home with no value if there's contamination in the area. Who wants to buy a home that's potentially in an industrial zone? I wouldn't buy my home if it was next to a gas drilling operation or a compressor station. Oh gee, I want to spend a lot of money and take a mortgage on and live next to this polluting industry. So you have to think about your home values, think about your mortgages, think about your insurance, earthquake insurance. And then hope that if something happens that your insurance company will cover you, whether or not you're a leaser or not. People with gas leases talk about their 40-page protective leases. I got this 40-page lease, I put everything in there. And my question to them is, A, what happens if you get compulsory integrated? They don't need your lease. Your lease is nothing but toilet paper. B, if they don't abide by the terms of your lease, what are you going to do? Sue them? They're in the same boat. The lure of money, everybody wants that lottery ticket. Boy, I could retire, I could pay off all my bills. The lure of money, as we all know, is huge. But as you saw with Chip's presentation, is it really out there? And who is going to be that millionaire? The vast majority of us? No. What about the people that rent homes? What about our elderly? They're on fixed incomes. In PA, they boot them out of their houses. They can't afford those rents. There are increases in homeless down there. It changes the character of your community, and not for the better. And the industry, as much as they like to deny it, the studies that have been done in state after state, community after community, about the boom-bust cycle and what happens to a community when the industry pulls out. They're all the same. the communities are always worse off. And so this is something, that's why I'm in this. I don't get paid to do this. I've been to a lot of little towns, basically to talk to people, so that you think about what's happening, and don't be afraid to speak out. I remember back when I got into this, I saw a little quote. It said, "Speak the truth, even if your voice shakes." And that's what you have to do. Every one of you is important in this, and you have to decide what you want here. Do you want compressor stations? Do you want pipelines taking away your rights? There's a big battle right now with the Constitution pipeline. Through eminent domain, they will take people's property, they will cut down their woods, places that have been protected, places that they have stewarded carefully to keep them like they are. And they want to take that away for a private company to make money to run pipelines through, to get this gas off to market or to get it exported. You know, where are our rights as New Yorkers, as community citizens, that a company can come in and just take our rights away so that they can make more profit? And I'm getting a little tired of it. You know, we're seeing the corporations